Good afternoon, my YouTube viewers. It is Crystal here, and I'm just here this afternoon because I want to give you another code review. The code review is on the August 2022 Tabular competition for Kaggle. And basically, I did the competition question this morning, and I did it very quickly. Because obviously I've got a lot to do. I have to produce a lot of content and things like that. So I did the Kaggle competition, and this is the code review. So what we'll do is we'll go over the code that I used to get on the leaderboard. The problem statement is the August 2022 edition of the Tabular Playground series is an opportunity to help the fictional company keep it dry, improve its main product, Super Soaker. The product is used in factories to absorb spills and leaks. The company has just completed a large testing study for different product prototypes. Can you use this data to build a model that predicts product failures? So basically what I did was I wrote the program in Kaggle's Jupyter Notebook under the competition in the directory of the competition because I wanted to enter the competition. So the first thing I did after I opened a new Jupyter Notebook was I imported the libraries. So the libraries that I wanted to import were NumPy SNP, and that does linear algebra, but it also does numerical computations and it creates NumPy arrays. I imported Pandas SPD, which it does data processing, but it also creates and maintains data frames. I imported Matplotlib PyPlot SPLT because that's a graphic package and it will plot your data points onto a graph. I imported Seaborn SNS, so that's a more highly improved graphic package that provides statistical operations as it's plotting the data points onto a graph. I imported OS because that goes into the operating system and gets the files that are going to be used to execute the program. And I also imported sklearn, which is a machine learning library, and it has lots of functions that we use. So after I imported the libraries, what I did was I loaded the files, and there were 3 files that were going to be used to execute the program, which are train, test, and sample submission. So after I loaded the files, I read the files. I used pandas.readcsv to read the 3 files in, and I called them train, test, and submission. So just looking at the train data set, here's the train data set. It's 26,570 rows by 26 columns. And if you look at the very end, it has failure, and that's a classification being either 1 or 0. So I checked info so you can find out whether the column is a float, an object, or an integer, and that gives you that information. And failure is an integer. It's a binary classification of either 1 or 0. We checked to see if there were any null characters, and I could have imputed it, but I just decided that on the train set to just go ahead and remove all the rows that had null values. So I used train equals train drop NA, and when I used train drop NA, it went down to 12,183 rows by 26 columns because I just made the decision that on the train set just to drop all not applicables. I analyzed the label, which was the failure column, and you can see that you have a class imbalance. You have a lot more zeros than you do 1. And then I made a plot of the the ones and zeros. So the 1 is the green and the 0 is the red. So you have a lot more zeros than you have ones. But, you know, I really do like these plots. I think that plotting graphs just adds so much to the program. And you're supposed to plot your data onto a graph so you can visualize it. And I thought that since this is a binary classification, I would plot this graph, and it just says it all. It shows you that most of them are 0 and a few of them are green, and you can see all that. So I defined my target with the target equals train failure. And now I'm checking test and submission. So the test set has 25 columns as opposed to train's 26 columns because the test does not have a target. That's what we're going to be predicting on. The submission has an ID and a failure column, and that's what we're going to be predicting on the failure rate. So now what we're going to do is we're going to combine the train and the test set. So we're going to combi equals train drop failure, axis equals 1 append test. So we're going to drop the failure as we are appending test to the train. So now we have 32,958 rows by 25 columns. I want to drop the ID because it's not necessary to have an ID, and the reason why is because the index number keeps track of the rows. We're going to check for null values. So we've still got lots of null values in the test set, or what was the test set. So in this particular instance, we're going to impute the null values. Okay, so if it's an object, it will just get a message that says not listed. If it's an integer, it will get the mean, and the mean will be rounded off. If it's a float, it'll be imputed with sklearn's iterative imputer. And if it's a date, it will just be given a date. And then so this is your new combi with all of the values imputed. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to check it's null again, and you see there's not any null characters anymore. We're going to encode the object columns because there were a few columns that were objects. So we're going ahead and use sklearn's ordinal encoder to encode the object columns. We're going to make a heat map so you can see that these are the how the columns are correlated to each other, and you can see that none of the columns have a very high correlation. The highest correlation, I think, is like about a 0.4 or 40%. So what we're going to do is I inserted code to be able to remove columns that have a high correlation, but there were not any columns that had a high correlation, so none of the columns were removed. Then we're going to normalize the data. We're going to take the data and we're going to convert it to a value of 0 to 1 because it's easier for the model to make predictions on data if it's between 0 and 1 and it's not spread out really far. We're going to define our x and our y variables. Y equals target, x equals combi, 0 to the length of train, x test equals combi, the length of train to 0. We're now going to use sklearn's train test split to split the data set into training and validating sets. So we have to check x train, x val, y train, y val equals train test split. X, y test set is 10%, random state is 42. And then you have to check the shape of x train, x val, y val, x test to make sure that the shapes are correct. Now we're going to select our model. We're going to use sklearn's random forest classifier. model equals random forest classifier, max depth equals 2, random state equals 42, class weight equals balance, n estimators equals 5,000, fit X train, Y train. We print the percentage and we had 58%. We're going to predict on the validation set. YPred equals model.predict xval, and we're going to print the prediction, and the prediction is 61%. We put it on a confusion matrix, and you can see that the confusion matrix that we had 605 actual zeros and 366 ones when they should have been 0, and 140 actual ones and 108 zeros when they should have been ones. We're going to predict on our test set. Predictions equals model.predict x test. So we have an array of predictions, and then we're going to prepare and submit our submission file. So submission failure equals prediction, submission to CSV, submission.csv, index equals false, my submission equals PD read submission CSV, and then you have my submission, which these are all your submissions. And so when I saved this and submitted it to Kaggle, I had a 55% accuracy, and it may seem low, but the highest accuracy was like maybe 59%. So my accuracy wasn't that low. So that's it for this code review. I went through it quickly because I have lots of content to create, but I wanted to be sure and put in a code review because I'm going to be using it for my blog posts as well. So I want to thank all of my subscribers for subscribing to my channel. If you like my video, please like, subscribe, and share. And thank you very much for watching this video. I look forward to making more videos for you in the future.